The arrival, a shadow in the void. The Zirak Dominion had never feared humans. To them, Earth was just another weak planet in a galaxy full of fragile species. The Zirak were warriors, conquerors. They had crushed empires, wiped out entire civilizations, and taken planets without effort. Now they had set their sights on Vesper 3, a small human colony at the edge of known space. Their fleet of 50 warships moved through the darkness, surrounding the planet like a pack of hungry beasts. Inside the command ship, High Warlord Carvox watched the blue-green world below with cold amusement. "This will be easy," one of his officers said. Carvox nodded. "Destroy their defenses. Take what we need. Leave nothing behind." The Zirak fleet prepared to fire. Massive cannons charged with energy, and thousands of fighters deployed from the hangars. The humans had no chance. Their colony defenses were weak. Only a few outdated turrets and a handful of small escort ships. It would take minutes, maybe seconds, to wipe them out. But then, something changed. A strange energy reading appeared on their scanners. Something big, something powerful. "High Warlord," a Zirak officer shouted. "Something is coming out of hyperspace." Carvox frowned. "Another human ship. Let it come. It won't matter." The crew turned toward the large viewing screen at the front of the ship. The darkness of space rippled, twisted. Then it appeared. A single, massive ship. Black as the void itself. Silent, motionless. It was bigger than any human ship they had ever seen. Its hull was covered in strange, shifting armor, and its engines barely made a sound. It had no markings, no signals, no communication. It was like a ghost, a shadow in the void. The Zirak officers stared in confusion. What is that?" one whispered. Carvox narrowed his eyes. "Scan it." The computers worked quickly, analyzing the strange ship. The results made no sense. "No crew detected," an officer reported. "No standard human weapon systems. No life signs at all." "Then what is it?" Carvox growled. Silence. The massive ship simply floated in space, facing the Zirak fleet like a predator watching its prey. Then the silence broke. A deep metallic voice echoed through the Zirak ships. It was calm, controlled, but filled with something terrifying. "You were warned." Before Carvox could react, the human ship moved. Faster than anything they had ever seen, it turned toward the nearest Zirak battleship and fired. A single, blinding shot of energy ripped through the enemy vessel like paper. The Zirak ship exploded instantly. Panic spread through the fleet. They destroyed the Dreadfang in one shot. An officer screamed. Carvox clenched his fists. "All ships. Return fire. Destroy it now." The Zirak warships unleashed everything they had. Cannons, missiles, plasma beams. A storm of destruction aimed at the human ship. But the Revenant did not move. The attacks hit its armor and vanished. No explosions, no damage. The Zirak weapons did nothing. Carvox's blood turned cold. "That's impossible." Then the human ship responded. With inhuman precision, it fired again, one shot per target. Each time, a Zirak ship was erased from existence. 1, 2, 5, 10. Their fleet was falling apart in seconds. Carvox could hear the voices of his captains over the communication channel, screaming, begging for orders, pleading for help. "Their weapons are too strong. We need to retreat. Our shields are useless." One by one, their voices were silenced. Carvox stared at the screen in horror. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre. The Revenant drifted forward, slow and unstoppable. It was not in a hurry. It was playing with them. Carvox had never been afraid of humans before. Now he understood why that had been a mistake. The unseen nightmare. The Zirak fleet was in chaos. Warships burned in silence, their wreckage drifting through the void like scattered corpses. The Revenant, the lone human battleship, had shattered 50 warships in mere minutes. High Warlord Carvox's claws trembled against the cold metal of his command chair. His mind raced for an answer, a weakness, anything that could explain this. This wasn't possible. Humans didn't have this kind of technology. His second-in-command, Commander Yalvik, turned to him, eyes wide with fear. "We need to retreat." Carvox's pride screamed in protest. The Zirak never retreated. They had conquered dozens of species, broken mighty empires, crushed armies with ease. They were warriors, the strongest in the galaxy. And yet, they were running like prey. A sudden clunk echoed through the ship. The lights flickered. Carvox straightened. What was that? Yalvik checked the readings. His scaly hands trembled over the console. It's inside. Carvox felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Inside. Yalvik turned to him, eyes wide with something that no Zirak commander had ever felt before. Terror. Suddenly, the ship lurched. The metal around them groaned, twisted, like something alive was moving through it. Then the screaming began. Not outside, not over the fleet's communication systems, but inside their own ship. The security channels crackled with terrified voices. Something is in the corridors. Weapons don't work. It's cutting through the walls. I can't see it. It's AARG. Silence. Carvox's breath came in short gasps. He had heard warriors die before. He had seen battlefields covered in blood. But this was different. This wasn't combat. This was something else. Something unnatural. The command bridge's doors slammed shut. The lights flickered again, dimming into a sickly red glow. Then, they heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Carvox turned his head slowly, his claws tightening on his weapon. The bridge crew held their breath, staring at the sealed door. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was too heavy, too controlled. Not the frantic steps of a soldier, not the skittering movement of a Zirak warrior. This was something patient. Carvox's throat went dry. Open the external cameras. Yalvik hesitated but obeyed, pulling up the live feed of the Revenant. The human ship was still there, untouched, unmoving. But something was different. The ship's hull had changed. The dark, shifting metal that covered its surface seemed to ripple, forming patterns, symbols, faces. Zirak faces. Carvox's stomach twisted. They weren't just random shapes. They were the faces of his crew, his soldiers. He could see their expressions, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams, as if they were trapped inside the ship itself. Yalvik choked on his breath. What are they doing to them? Before Carvox could answer, the bridge went dark. The only sound left was the slow, deliberate footsteps, getting closer. Whispers in the dark. The bridge was silent. The red emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows over the trembling Zirak officers. Carvox gripped his weapon tighter, his claws digging into the cold metal. The footsteps had stopped. Something was outside the door, waiting, watching. Yalvik's breath was ragged. His fingers hovered over the control panel, desperately searching for a way to override the lockdown. High Warlord, he whispered, we have to get out of here. Carvox didn't respond. His mind raced, but no strategy, no battle maneuver, no tactical doctrine applied to this. They had fought empires, crushed civilizations, obliterated enemies with overwhelming firepower. But this wasn't a battle. This was a hunt, and they were the prey. The control panel fizzled, sparks flying as the screens glitched. A low, static-filled hum replaced the usual mechanical beeping. Then, a voice. Not Zirak, not machine, not human. Something else. You hear us now, don't you? Yalvik froze, his eyes darting to the others. The bridge crew stared at each other in horror. They had all heard it. We are here. We have always been here. Carvox's throat tightened. Who are you? Silence. Then, the door whispered open. not with the mechanical hiss of normal ship doors. No, this sound was wrong, like metal peeling away, like flesh being torn apart slowly. Beyond the doorway, the corridor was black, not just dark, empty, a void where light refused to exist. Karvok stepped back instinctively. His warriors raised their weapons, their hands shaking. And then something stepped through. A shape, not fully formed, not fully real. It moved like a shadow struggling to be solid. It had a humanoid outline, but too tall, too thin, shifting like it was made of liquid darkness. And then its head tilted, and Karvok saw it. The faces. Inside the creature's shifting body, he could see them. The missing Zyrek crew. Their eyes were wide with terror. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their hands pressed against the inside, as if trying to claw their way out. Karvok's vision blurred with shock. This wasn't a human soldier. This wasn't a machine. This was the ship itself. It had taken them, absorbed them, and now it had come for more. Yalvik screamed. One of the officers fired his weapon, a desperate act of defiance. The plasma bolt vanished the moment it touched the creature, swallowed whole by the darkness. The creature laughed. Not a normal laugh. Not a sound any living thing should make. A chorus of voices. The voices of the absorbed crew, layered together in a sickening, broken melody. Your weapons mean nothing. You are already ours. You just don't know it yet. The bridge shook violently. Screens cracked. Metal groaned. The revenant was changing, expanding, infecting. And suddenly, Karvok understood. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a virus, a nightmare, a disease of war itself. And it was spreading. The lights died completely. And then, the screaming began again. The revenant's hunger. Darkness swallowed the bridge. Total, absolute, smothering. Karvok couldn't see. He couldn't hear. Even his own breath felt stolen. Then, the whispering began again. Not from the creature, but from inside his own mind. You were warriors once, weren't you? The voices slithered through his thoughts, cold and invasive. They weren't asking. They were remembering. You conquered the weak, burned their worlds, took what you wanted. Karvok's body locked up. He felt exposed, as if something was peeling through his memories. Did you ever wonder what it felt like, being on the other side? Then, light. Not from the ship, not from the failing systems. From the walls. The entire bridge pulsed, the metal turning translucent, and within it, the crew. Their bodies fused into the structure, faces twisted in silent agony. Their hands reached out, pressed against the metal like glass, fingers clawing, mouths open in endless screams. The bridge crew staggered back in horror. Yalvik fell to his knees, shaking violently. Warlord, what is this? Karvok's throat was dry. His claws trembled. The creature stood motionless in the doorway, watching, waiting. You took lives. You built empires from bones. We learned from you. The whispers shifted, layering over each other like a broken symphony. Now we do the same. The floor beneath them rippled, not like metal, but like liquid, like a thing breathing. Karvok snapped out of his shock. Instinct roared back to life. Fire, all of you. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness, scorching the bridge. The room shook from the sheer force, yet the creature did not move. Instead, the walls opened. Not doors, mouths. The crew's screams became real, bodies yanked backward as the ship swallowed them whole. Karvok watched in horror as his warriors vanished into the living metal, their forms sinking into the walls, becoming part of it. Yalvik grabbed Karvok's arm, his voice raw with terror. We have to run. Karvok had never run from battle, not once in his life. But this wasn't a battle. This was something worse. He turned and sprinted, Yalvik at his side. Behind them, the bridge erased itself. The walls shifted into a solid mass. trapping the remaining officers inside. The last thing Carvox heard as he fled was their desperate, choking cries, and the whisper of the creature, amused. "Run, warlord. It won't matter." Then the doors sealed shut. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. The war that never ends. The corridor stretched endlessly. Carvox and Yalvik ran, their claws scraping against the shifting metal floor. Behind them, the bridge was gone, sealed away, consumed by the Revenant. But the ship was alive, and it wasn't letting them escape. The walls rippled, pulsing like something breathing. The lights overhead flickered erratically, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Yalvik panted, his voice shaking. "High Warlord, what are we fighting?" Carvox didn't know. This wasn't just human technology. This was something else, something worse. Then, the whispers returned. "You called yourselves conquerors, but you never truly won. You left enemies broken, but never erased them. We do not make that mistake." The corridor shifted. Suddenly, it was not metal anymore. It was ash. Carvox stumbled, his feet kicking up clouds of gray dust. Yalvik gasped, looking around in confusion. They were no longer inside the Revenant. They were standing on a battlefield. A world Carvox recognized instantly. A world his empire had destroyed centuries ago. Bodies lay scattered in the ruins, not Zirak, not human. They were from a race Carvox had personally ordered to extinction. Their dead eyes stared accusingly. It was impossible. This isn't real," Yalvik stammered. Carvox wanted to believe that. Then the bodies moved. The corpses began to rise, dust spilling from their hollow mouths. Their bones cracked as they turned toward Carvox. And then, they charged. Carvox reacted instinctively, raising his weapon and firing into the swarm of dead. The plasma burned through them, but they kept coming. Behind him, Yalvik screamed as skeletal hands dragged him to the ground. Carvox reached for him. Then the battlefield was gone. They were back inside the Revenant. But Yalvik was missing. Carvox spun around wildly, his breath ragged. "Yalvik?" No answer. Just the hum of the ship, deep and endless. Then, the walls changed. A new shape pressed through the metal. A figure, struggling as if trapped behind glass. Yalvik. His mouth moved silently, his hands pressed against the surface, reaching for Carvox. His eyes were wild with terror. But Carvox could not help him. The wall swallowed him whole. "You called yourself a warlord," the whispers mocked. "You are nothing." Carvox felt his knees weaken. Everything, his empire, his conquests, his victories, meant nothing here. Because the Revenant wasn't just killing them. It was erasing them. The Phantom War. Carvox stood frozen, his claws trembling. Yalvik was gone. Not dead. Gone. The ship had swallowed him, erased him, as if he had never existed. No remains, no screams, no mercy. And now, the whispers were laughing. "You thought war was conquest. You thought victory was survival. You never understood. War is memory. And we erase what we defeat." Carvox snarled, forcing his legs to move. He would not be erased. He sprinted down the endless corridors, his heart pounding. But the ship was shifting again. With every step, the walls morphed, no longer sleek metal, but battlefields. His battlefields. Each corridor became a war he had fought, and won. His armies marching forward, cities burning, enemies screaming. But something was wrong. His warriors were missing. Instead, the enemies he had defeated were the ones standing, whole, alive, stronger. And then, they turned to him. They remembered. The Krint warlords from the 5th invasion. The Vothri rebels who had fought to their last breath. The Srak assassins who had vowed vengeance upon his name. All of them were alive. And all of them were coming for him. Carvox fired his weapon, roaring in fury. Plasma bolts tore through their ranks, but the dead did not fall. Instead, they laughed. The air rippled, and suddenly, Carvox was no longer the warlord. He was the prey. He ran, his breath ragged, his mind screaming at the impossibility of it all. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. And then he saw it. At the end of the shifting corridor, a doorway, the hangar, his escape. Carvox surged forward, pushing past the ghostly warriors, ignoring their taunting whispers. He burst into the hangar and stopped dead in his tracks. The docking bay was open to space, but outside there were no stars, no planets, no galaxy, just darkness, a void, and floating in it, millions of warships, some Zirak, some from other empires, some ancient, some new, all of them dead, all of them taken, and all of them watching him. Carvox's claws tightened around his weapon. He had spent his entire life conquering, killing, winning, but for the first time, he realized he had already lost. The forgotten warlord. Carvox stood at the edge of the abyss, his claws trembling. The void stretched endlessly before him, swallowing everything. Stars, planets, fleets, history. The warships floating in the darkness were not wrecks. They were prisons. He could see them moving, their cold, lifeless hulls shifting ever so slightly, as if something inside still struggled to escape. And then, the whispers returned. You fought for power. You waged wars for dominance. But you never understood the cost. Carvox spun around, his rifle raised. The hangar had changed. It was no longer steel and machinery. It was a throne room. His throne room. But the banners of the Zirak Empire were torn, fluttering in an unseen wind. The golden floors were cracked, splattered with blood. And in the center of the room, a figure sat on his throne, a Zirak warlord, clad in battle-worn armor, his eyes burning with rage. Carvox recognized him instantly, because it was him, his own reflection. The other Carvox rose slowly, his claws tapping against the hilt of a plasma blade. You are not the first. You are not the last. Carvox snarled, raising his rifle. This is a trick. The other Carvox only smiled. It is the truth. The whispers grew louder, until they weren't whispers anymore. They were voices, thousands of them, millions, all speaking his name. Carvox looked around and saw them. Warlords, conquerors, empires that once ruled the stars, now nothing but ghosts. They stood in the shadows, their faces hollow, their bodies worn by time, their names long forgotten. The truth hit him like a blade through the chest. This wasn't a nightmare. This was where all warlords ended up. You called yourself a conqueror. Now you are nothing. Carvox roared, lunging forward. But the other Carvox vanished, and the throne room collapsed into darkness. He fell, endlessly. His screams vanished into the void. And somewhere, far beyond the abyss, the Revenant moved forward, seeking its next warlord.